Hey guys, Saf here with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and in today's video I want to take a look at what is the best summoning event for you in 2023. Now we've got a lot of diverse different systems in place now where they've got, recently they did a Michinaki guaranteed event where it was like a summon rush event. We've had the 1+1 events quite a lot. They give us guaranteed champions, although we haven't had a guaranteed ancient for ages until they've announced it today, which we'll talk about in a moment. And of course, we've had the traditional ×10 and ×2 events that have been going on for many years. So if you don't know what's going on tomorrow, it is a ×10 event tomorrow where you can get yourself some really strong champions, to be fair. Although I would say a non-void ×10 is pretty bad for just general math. We'll have a look at the math for that and revisit it now that we've got some more void legendaries and other things, just to kind of show you how ×10 really doesn't help you. But the interesting thing that's happening this weekend is there's going to be a guaranteed ancient event champion after months of waiting. I'm holding my head in my hands because I literally have held on to ancients for 3 months going, there's got to be a guaranteed ancient at some point. There's got to be a guaranteed ancient. And on the weekend, I kind of hit that point where I was like, okay, we haven't had one for like 5 months. Maybe they've just decided that guaranteed ancients were just too good and we're never going to do it again. And then, of course, within a week, they do the guaranteed ancient. So either they've got my video up in the office or I was just extremely unlucky that that was going to happen. But yes, we have got a guaranteed. You can come to hellhades.com. We always post all the news and everything that's going on in Raid. Every day we got a daily article going out that's really cool to keep up to date with the game. And you can see we've got a ×10 here with Siphi, Archbishop Pintroy, Kyoku, Martyr, Isala the Mourner, Seeker, Mausoleum Mage, and Grizzle Jarl. Particularly Seeker, Martyr, Kyoku, Pintroy, and Siphi are really good, and Asala's not a bad epic either. I have got her on my free-to-play, so I know she's quite strong. I haven't really used her yet. But if you're looking to build a clan boss team, this weekend is amazing because you could get yourself either a Kyoku, a Seeker, both excellent for clan boss, or you can get yourself Alsgor, who is the new sort of pairing champion with Jetney, the Jetney the Giant fusion that pretty much everyone has completed by now. So if you got Jetney, then obviously it's kind of like, oh, well, when they're put together, they're a lot stronger than when they're apart. It kind of makes Jetney a much better champion. And we were always like, well, you got to get the champion first, which is quite hard on a non-void basis. But they have increased the rate here to 180. Which is about 30 more ancient shards than normal. They've done 150 in the past. So we are seeing that kind of shard inflation continue into the ancient that we saw in the sacreds and that we've seen in the void. Now, do we actually think that that's a good trade? Well, we're going to have a look at the math today in this video to actually see what the realistic terms of return rates are for each of the different types of events to see if 180 is a fair trade. Also, there's a super raid going on for Dragon's Lair on the 26th. I wonder if we're going to have like a special tournament, or maybe there's a ×2 alongside that super raid for a specific artifact set. Who knows? Now, you can also come up here and you can kind of have a look at the past guaranteed champions. So you can kind of have a look at the way the sort of scale is going. So we've had a unique style with Michinaki where we had a champion. Wasn't really a champion chase. It was more like a summon rush. We should probably update the title in there. It was a summon rush event where you basically had to, like a traditional summon rush from a fusion, get enough fragments to be able to get the champion, but you got total fragments in one event. It's the first time they've done that type of event. It was quite an interesting option because it meant you didn't have to go 15 sacreds. You could offset it with sacreds and voids in various different fashion. We had a guaranteed for Supreme Kale, 110 voids for Chagor. You can see they've done a lot of voids recently, 110 for Aileel, 24 Elva Autumnborn, and then the last guaranteed ancient was back in November. It was months ago, so I had given up hope. So I don't know whether I'm actually going to pull for Alsgor. We might talk about that at the end. But what I want to do in this video is I want to look at the math that Senti has put together, Senti's a long-standing member of the community, is a bit of a big brain, probably a bigger brain than me when it comes to math, I'll be honest. He has got a degree in it. He is a smart cookie. To look at the average long-term gains for a legendary champion using your shards. We're going to look at that math now. Now, what do we mean by long-term rate? So that basically translates roughly to what's the average amount of shards you're going to need to pull on average to acquire the legendary champion. Now, Senti has done the math on here. If I try to explain exactly how he's determined the standard rate, I'm probably going to butcher it. But if you want, join our Discord. You can ask the question, but he'd be able to explain in a bit more detail if he wanted to, better than I could. But I trust him to a fault when it comes to a math. I don't ever doubt what he's saying is correct. So this 128 figure is pretty accurate. What that basically is telling you is if there was no standard rates based on mercy averages, how often you would pull an ancient, the mercy system. So when we're looking at averages here, we actually need to look at how the mercy system interacts with this system. So by now, everyone knows once you pull an ancient shard, you've got a 0.5% chance on standard rate of getting a legendary, an 8% chance of an epic, and a 91.5% chance of a rare. When they start doing things like ×2 rates, they basically double the epic and legendary and take it out of the rare probabilities. And when you have ×10, all they tend to do with the ×10 is take, if you imagine a deck of cards, they basically just load the deck of cards with 9 more cards of that same champion. So you basically have 10 cards out of all of the cards to pull one champion. That's kind of roughly how it works in a basic explanation. Obviously with a 1+1, you have the same rates, but it means that once you pull it, you trigger a bonus legendary, and the guaranteed legendary also is just pull to the required number, and then you get your legendary. Now, there are some things you need to understand about how the mercy system works. So on an ancient and a void, after you've summoned 200 champions without a legendary, you start getting into your mercy system and you start being able to get a much higher chance of getting it. It roughly works out in my head. I normally think once I've hit about 220, I should be deep into my mercy. Sacred mercy is much worse. After the 12 summons, you start getting +2%. So what we're looking at here is the average rate of getting a legendary after you've started pulling into your mercy and different things of that, and calculating all this math in here. Now, mercy, when it comes to a guaranteed, doesn't get reset. So the mercy continues to track. So essentially, if you pull to the 150 or the 180 ancient shards, you don't reset your mercy. So that's the key thing to take away here. So with that information and context here, how does it look? So Zen is basically saying the average rate, the number of ancient shards you're going to need to pull to get a legendary is about 128.5 on a standard non-event system. And that drops to 81.3 on double rates. And on a bonus 1+1 style event, so where you get double legendaries, you get one legendary and a bonus legendary, it drops to 64.3 ancients. That is the long-term average you require to pull an ancient. Now with guaranteed events, because it doesn't reset your mercy, effectively it's a free bonus legendary if you take out the concept of the guaranteed. You're still pulling towards your mercy, you're still pulling towards the non-guaranteed legendary. So as long as you don't pull a legendary in the process of getting to that free guaranteed, then you could pull 180 shards. If you don't get a legendary before your 180th shard, you're 180 deep towards your mercy. That's kind of how it works. So what the math is basically telling us here is if we were doing a guaranteed 100 ancient champion, well, it would be the best event on the cards for you. A guaranteed champion for 100 ancients is on average 56.25. It is the best event to pull for. If we went to a guaranteed of 150, which is what it was before we saw the recent one, all the previous ones were around about 150 ancients. Well, it basically was worse than a 1+1, but it was quite a bit better than the ×2 ancients. So you're talking probably about a 10 pull here or there. Now with the 180, we can see that actually it's still better than a ×2 ancients. So basically you're still better off pulling on a guaranteed 180 if you want to get the best rates of getting legendary champions than you are pulling on a ×2, even at a guaranteed of 180. You could probably take this to 200 and it's still better even at 200, but it's getting much closer. The break point will be around about 220, which is when you're guaranteed in your mercy to get a champion there, right? 220 is about the guarantee normally towards a mercy. So even at 180, it still goes in this tier list for ancients that the worst event to pull legendaries on an ancient shard is double ancient rates. It is the worst event. Now, this needs to be contextualized around 2 facts. Firstly, it doesn't take into account what you get in terms of epic champions. So for my main account, a ×2 ancient is pretty poor because all I really care about on my main account are legendary champions. I have all the epic champions that are relevant to me in the game, by excluding some of the newer ones like Creedon I didn't manage to get. So for my main account, ×2 is all about the legendaries. So if all we care about is the legendaries, it's the worst event for legendaries. But if it's on my free to play, I need a lot more epic champions, loads of champions. I don't have many of them. It means that the rates of the epic get increased alongside it. So therefore it's probably better for me to pull on the ×2 ancients under that context. Also, if you're pulling for champion chase, obviously a ×2 ancient is almost a free event in the sense that as long as you save your ancients, you get so many epic champions, it's quite easy to get a lot of points. So that's something to keep in mind. So that is the worst event. Then it's probably the guaranteed, but that needs to be contextualized against the guaranteed champion. If that champion happens to be particularly really good, then that's 180 ancient shards well spent, and it's probably better than a 1+1, because the 1+1 doesn't guarantee what champions you're going to get. It could be any epics. It could be the same. It could be legendaries you already own. I'm pretty sure it can't be the same legendary. You can't 1+1 a duplicate. You can't pull like 2 Kreelers out of the 1+1. So you're almost guaranteed to get 2 non-duplicate champions, but they could be existing duplicates. So you could pull out of it something like a Nobel and a Kreeler, and you already have one of those 2. That needs to be contextualized as the guarantee. Although it's worse than a 1+1 in terms of the volume of legendaries you get, if the guaranteed champion is particularly good, then obviously it's a very good trade. So that's kind of like the tier list here, which is 1+1 is the best event to pull for legendaries. So if 1+1 events come around, you should pull your ancient shards for them if you care about legendaries. The guaranteed events are a little bit worse, but not so much that they're as worse as a ×2. So guaranteed is better than ×2. Now, of course, the other thing you should put into context here is this is mathematical analysis in terms of the average return rate. So what you need to keep in mind, it's going to feel pretty terrible pulling all of these ancients and the 1+1. And if you don't get the pull, then obviously that feels bad. Or even pulling 180 ancients and getting all epics. You need to keep in mind that even though you've pulled 180 ancients, even if you don't get another legendary, you're well on your way to Mercy, which means that on average, you've spent less ancient shards to get the legendaries because you've got a guaranteed legendary. I hope that kind of makes sense. It's very difficult to explain what I mean by that, but it's the emotional thing of I've pulled 180 agents, I got nothing. Well, you haven't, because you've been building up this Mercy counter in the background, right? You've been building up constantly. So that's what you need to keep in mind. Now with Void Shards, it's pretty much the same thing. The only thing I would say with Void Shards is they dropped it down to 110. So the 110 guarantee is actually much more efficient. So a guaranteed Void champion is very, very good, because essentially it's more efficient than ×2 Voids, and it's more efficient than any sort of 1+1 Void. I don't actually think they've ever done a 1+1 Void. Correct me in chat. Let me know in the comments, have we ever seen a 1+1 Void Shard for legendary champions? I don't think we have. Now, of course, a 110 is still incredibly valuable. It's much better to be pulling for a guaranteed Void champion. Probably guaranteed Void champions are the best event to pull shards for, because you get a 54% improvement over the base rate of normal Voids. You know, normal Voids is going to be the same for ancients because it's the same odds. You're going to be at 81.3 here for the Void shards, it's 37%. A 1+1, if they ever did it, would be the same as an ancient. But the difference is because Void shards are harder to acquire, they've dropped the actual requirements down for the guaranteed Void. So 110 is basically, you know, a lot more Void shards to save. We're talking about 20 to 30 Void shards we're saving here. 20, I think, by the looks of that basic math. So in terms of a Void shard, guaranteed Void events are very, very good if the Void champion is good. It's always the context with these things. If the guaranteed champion is not good, then all of it's kind of not relevant, right? Because you're getting a bad champion. Finally, let's have a look at Sacred Shards. Now, if you've caught any of my anecdotal comments about ×2 Sacreds, you'll see that often I don't like pulling for them. I find them really bad. And I actually have said from time to time that 1+1 events for Sacred Shards are very good. And the math here is kind of backing that up. Because if you look for the 1+1, let's just put this back to 100 for a second. The 1+1 for Sacreds is about 5.9 Sacreds to trigger that one, to get legendary, because you're getting a bonus one, right? So you're getting 2. So it's actually 50% better than the normal rate, and the normal rate for ×2 is 36%. So when it comes to Sacreds, the best event again is 1+1, because you get a very good rate and you're getting those guaranteed 2 legendaries. And when we look at the guaranteed for Sacreds, we've had 2. The more recent ones have been 20. Previously, they used to be 15. So if we have a look at the 15, then that is better than the ×2, but not as good as the 1+1. But the 20s are basically matching what you would normally get on a ×2 Sacred. Now, all of this is contextualized with the 1+1 events specifically. If you don't trigger the 1+1, then the math kind of falls apart, right? You need to be able to trigger it to be able to get the benefits of the math, because otherwise you basically summoned a load of ancients and you haven't got that bonus legendary that you get out of it. So yeah, the TLDR here that I want to kind of say is, in 2023, what event should you be saving for? 1+1 looks to be the best for ancient and sacreds. The guaranteed voids are by far the best for the void shard, and then the guaranteed champions are still better than normal ×2, but actually they're not really, they're getting closer to more being on the average of a ×2. They're moving them up to the bracket where they're still a little bit better than ×2, but they're not as much as they were when they were 150 or 15 sacreds. So lastly, I just want to have a quick look at the analysis of ×10 events right now in the game. In 2023, we're halfway through the year. How much difference have we got? So I do actually have a sample of data, so the client data from back in January 14th, 2021. So we knew at that point how many champions could be summoned from the portal, so excluding the Doom Tower champions, Lydia, Mithrala, the free champions, and all those kind of things. How many of them could be summoned and how much that affects the ×10 rate. So we can see here, if we look at the legendary champions first, because that's what everyone really kind of cares about. Back in January the 14th, 2021, we had 85 legendary champions. As of patch 7.1, which is the latest patch, we have 151 legendary champions in the game that you can summon. So we have increased around about 78%. So that is in about, January 2021. It's about 2.5 years we've added 66 legendary champions. So it's a fairly big increase, but it's not like we're getting loads and loads of them in a very short space of time. Now, how does that affect the ×10? So the chances back in January 14th, 2021 for you to get a singular champion without any ×10 odds was about 1.2%. And then if there was one champion in the ×10 pool, then you would have a 10.6% chance of getting that champion. Now, keep in mind, the more champions that get added to the ×10 pool, the lower this number gets reduced by, because essentially the way that it works is they take 9 additional cards and they put that card for that champion in the pool, in the deck of cards that you can pull out of the shard when you pull it. So obviously if you add 9 ×3 of other champions, it's going to dilute the pool of the chance of getting one specific one out of the ×10. It'll increase the chances of getting all of the ×10 champions by a similar amount, but the individual champion will go down the more cards you introduce. So at here we got 10.6%. So you can see now, as of today, the odds of you getting a ×10 when there's only a single champion. If you think of last weekend when there was a Ragash, you had a 6.3% chance that if you pulled legendary, you would get a Ragash. That is down by 41%. So realistically, a conversation that's been flying around for a while now is, do we need ×15? Do we need ×20? Well, the math kind of says if ×10 back in that date was 10.6%, if we want to be able to match that, then at least a ×15 on non-void is required. Even a ×15, we would be down about 15%. A ×20, we would be above that number by 11%. So if you wanted to future-proof it, ×20 would be the way to go. How does it affect void legendaries? Well, you can see in the same time span, we've gone from 29 void legendaries to 50 void legendaries. So it's a third of the size of possible options. And that means now you have, on a singular champion like Grisor Irongut, when I pulled shards yesterday for Grisor Irongut, we had a 16.95% chance that it was going to be Grisor if we pulled legendary. What this math doesn't tell you is actually it was a 100% chance I was going to pull a Whirling Frost King, because that's what happened. But hey, we jest. But yes, so that has gone down 36% because it used to be 26.32%. It's now 16.95%. So every time they add a void legendary, it dilutes the chance of you getting another one. It's quite important from a catch-up mechanic, because what it generally means is the ×10 events become less desirable. The math we did in the previous screen is only about getting legendaries. This is about getting specific legendaries, and you can kind of see that, to be honest, those multi-champion ×10 events means that it doesn't really significantly improve your odds that you're going to get that champion, because it's less than 5% chance you're going to get the ×10. It doesn't really feel like it doesn't really feel like it's worth pulling for, in my opinion. I feel like a ×10 is just a bait on a non-void. On a void, 17% chance is still pretty good, but a lot of Krakens will tell you the more void legendaries they introduce, the harder it gets to get those really good champions. And the other thing that kind of irks them a lot is if the void legendary they do introduce is not very good. Someone like a Kleidner, I would suggest, or even a Tremaria, where they're borderline void legendary because what they do is just not that powerful. It kind of weakens the pool then, and you end up pulling some of those bad champions. It is kind of part of the course, but that's just a note to have. Now, in terms of epic champions, we've gone from 137 to 209, so we've increased the epic pool by 53%. So we've added more legendaries than we've added epics. And you can see, again, the odds are on a ×10 for an epic. They're down 33%. They're not too far away. but actually we're more aligned with a times 15 if we want to get back to where we were, which is a 6.8% chance. So really we should be around about a times 15 on a non-void epic. And then on a void epic, we've gone from 33 void epics to 44 void epics. That's an increase of 33%. It's the smallest pool of champions that has been increased. And we have gone from a 23.81% chance to 18.87. And I would say that that's quite important to note because there are a lot of powerful void epics in the game. We're talking Seer, Demitha, Skrank. We've got Akimtum. Some, people like Stylar are still very good, very powerful. Whisper, very powerful void legendary champions that can do things that legendary champions can't do to some extent. Demitha, for example, enables teams that many legendary champions cannot enable. So it's still valuable to have a very good odds of getting getting epic voids, and that is down 21%. But again, if we were to increase it to a times 15, I would say that's too aggressive based on what the times 10 originally was. So you can kind of see that we've added lots more legendaries, we've added not as many epics, and to be honest, the times 10 legendary is now falling very far behind, almost half the efficiency of what it was back in 2021 when I started playing the game, or maybe a year before. I forget, time blurs together. So there you go, guys. What is the best event to pull for in 2023? The 1+1s look the best for the Sacred and the Ancient Shards. The guaranteed Void events are probably the best Void event you can pull for. And then the guaranteed Ancients is dependent on the actual champion, but is still better than the ×2. And unfortunately, unless you want those epic champions, getting legendaries from ×2 is the worst event to pull for. That is the kind of the TLDR. Let me know in the comments below, guys, if you are going to be pulling for Alsgor. As a collector, I kind of want to pull for him, but I've just pulled all my Ancient Shards, so do I really want to be going 180 shards deep to get a champion that really my main account doesn't need? I would say if you don't have an Ultra Nightmare clan boss and you have the shards, he's like Helikath. He will give you an opportunity to make a tower block damage team, and you can probably get yourself into Ultra Nightmare. So in that case, he's worth it, because if you don't have an unkillable like Maneater, you don't have a Demitha, you don't have a Helikath, he is one of the best clan boss champions for that. He's not as exciting as those other champions, but he'll do the job just as good. So if you haven't got an Ultra Nightmare, Alsgor's worth it. Otherwise, you're kind of on the fence a bit, and that's where I'm at the moment. But let me know in the comments below, are you pulling for it? Has this changed your opinion about which events that you would pull for? Because I know a lot of people will say ×2 is the best, and it's surprising that the math actually tells us, well, no, guaranteed and 1+1 events are the best. So there you go, guys. As usual, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification. About half of you actually are not subscribed who watch all of my video content. So if you want to see more of us, hit that subscribe button. And as always, if you've liked the video, hit that thumbs up. I will be on stream tonight at around about 8 p.m. UK time. Hell Hades is away. He's socializing. He's touching grass. He's getting some sunlight. He's doing his thing. I figured I would take his usual spot and cover for him so we can have some fun tomorrow night, and we're probably not going to do anything like viewer shards. We'll probably just talk about, building some teams. I've got some cool little clan boss things I'm going to be doing. Maybe we'll have a look at Artak if they have fixed his passive yet, so we can start building some teams, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, catch me on this YouTube channel around about 8 p.m. today. We will be 8 p.m. UK time. We will be playing some raid for approximately 3 to 4, maybe even 5 hours. We'll see how the stream goes. There you go, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.